Emma had dedicated 42 years of her life to working with primates, offering them the compassion that humans often failed to provide. But nothing in her life was as significant as the night she raided that laboratory. That night in 2006, everything changed for Emma and for the 5-month-old white baby gorilla. Controversial experiments in genetic engineering were gaining momentum, and Emma, working for a private animal rights organization, had been watching a particular laboratory for months. That night, she finally managed to get inside, and what she witnessed shook her to her core. In a small cage, in the middle of a cold, sterile room, lay a gorilla infant with fur as white as snow. The other gorillas in the surrounding cages were dark-colored, natural-looking. But this infant was different, almost defying the laws of nature. When Emma examined the files, she learned the truth. This was one of the first genetically modified gorilla infants. He wasn't albino. This was the result of deliberate genetic intervention. Scientists had tampered with his genetics, intending to display him as a rare species, perhaps even to sell him to wealthy collectors. At that moment, the tiny creature lived without a mother, without love, existing only as an experimental object. Something broke within Emma's heart, and she made a decision. She couldn't leave him there, risking her career, her freedom, perhaps even her life. She took Kesi out of that place. She named him Kesi, which meant hope in an ancient language, because he represented hope for her. He was proof that humanity was still capable of good, that love could be stronger than science. The first days were difficult. Kesi was traumatized. He cried through the nights, trembling in Emma's arms. But Emma didn't give up. She fed him warmed milk, sang lullabies for hours, and slowly gained his trust by showing him that she was there every time he woke up. As the months passed, the bond between them grew stronger. As Kesi grew, his white fur seemed to shine even brighter. But it wasn't just his physical development. His intelligence, his ability to empathize, and his loving gaze amazed everyone, as if he was now receiving back all the love he had lost in that laboratory cell, multiplied. By the time he turned 3, Kesi was already too big to climb on Emma's shoulder. But he still came to her side every morning, resting his huge head on her knees, waiting for her hands to wander through his fur. These moments were sacred for Emma, a time for silent conversation. She taught Kesi simple things: how to peel fruit, how to play games, even how to open a simple lock. She had shown him this last skill as a fun activity, a metal lock with small buttons turned in the right sequence. Kesi thought it was a game, but it was actually one of the most important gifts Emma had given him: the ability to understand the idea of freedom. Years passed. When Kesi turned 10, he weighed over 200 kilos. His white fur literally glowed in the sunlight, and his amber eyes held a deep wisdom. Emma could no longer keep him at home. It would be dangerous and wrong. But she found the best solution she could. The local Rehabilitation Center agreed to accept Kesi. It was a professional facility designed for injured animals in need of protection, with large areas where Kesi would be safe, cared for by experts, and able to move freely. The day she took him there, Emma felt something tear inside her. Kesi looked at her, and there was an understanding in those big eyes, as if he knew that Emma thought this was best for him. As she left him, Emma stroked his head one last time, whispering in his ear, "I will always love you, Kesi. You're my son." And Kesi touched Emma's face, those giant fingers touching hers as if making a promise that he would never forget her. After that day, Emma visited him every week. She couldn't make direct contact, but watching him from behind the bars was enough. Every time Kesi saw her, he would stand up, place his hands on the bars, and look at her, a look that seemed to say, "Mom, you're here. Everything is." Time was merciless, especially toward Emma. When she reached 65, the diagnosis was merciless: amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, a disease that imprisoned her mind within a body that was failing, betraying her. Her legs weakened, hands trembled. Within a year, she was confined to a wheelchair, her speech slurred, each word an effort. The cruelest part? Her mind remained sharp, her feelings deep, yet she struggled to express anything. Visiting Kesi became impossible, her health a barrier. Months passed. The absence consumed her. Time was running out, and she yearned to see him one last time. Her sister, Sarah, understanding this, devised a plan. Special permission was granted from the Rehabilitation Center. And so, one spring morning, beneath dancing cherry blossoms, Sarah wheeled Emma to the center. The pitying looks of passers-by meant nothing. Her attention was solely for the figure in the distance, Kesi, standing like a white giant in a large outdoor area. As Sarah pushed the wheelchair closer, the spring sun warmed Emma's face. Cherry blossoms landed in her hair, but her eyes were only for her son. They stopped just before the bars. Kesi sat on a large rock, his back turned. Emma tried to call out, but only rasping sounds escaped her. Tears streamed down her face. To be so close, yet unable to reach him, was unbearable. Sarah touched her shoulder. "Let me call him," she offered softly. But then, a miracle. Kesi turned his head. Perhaps he felt the vibration, or maybe instinct whispered to him. His amber eyes found Emma. In that moment, the world went silent. Only the woman and the gorilla existed, mother and son, reunited after years. Slowly, Kesi stood. His massive 210 kilos frame moved with a strange grace as he walked toward the bars. Purpose filled each step. He remembered her. Reaching the bars, he stopped. Gripping the metal, his head bowed, eyes fixed on Emma. Then a sound, deep and human-like, as if in pain, a characteristic gorilla sound of sadness. Sarah brought the chair closer, until only a meter separated them. The bars were the sole obstacle. Emma, trembling, reached out, but lacked the strength. Understanding, Kesi extended his own giant hand through the bars. His fingers touched hers. 10 years since she had truly touched him. Now those giant fingers intertwined with hers. Warm, soft, familiar. Kesi's fingers began to tremble. Was he crying? Could gorillas cry? Emma didn't know, but she knew they shared the same pain. A word escaped her lips. Kai. His huge head bowed further, leaning against the bars as if to hug Emma. Then something extraordinary happened. Kesi pulled back his hand, turned his head slightly, examined the lock on the edge of the bars, and acted. The simple lock mechanism Emma had taught him years ago as a game. 3 buttons, turned in a specific sequence. A system designed to prevent accidental openings. Kesi remembered. He turned the first button right, the second left, the third right. A click. The lock opened. Sarah gasped. "Oh my God," she whispered. Center security guards, noticing the situation on the monitors, panicked. Alarms blared. But Emma felt no fear, only love, as she looked into Kesi's eyes. Slowly, Kesi pushed the door open. The metal bars creaked, and the giant gorilla, for the first time in 10 years, stepped outside freely. Security teams came running, tranquilizer darts and guns in hand. "Get back!" someone shouted. "The animal has gotten loose!" But Kesi ignored them. He looked only at Emma, moving toward her with slow, careful steps, as if approaching something breakable. Sarah froze behind the chair, unable to move. Emma struggled to signal with her hand. "Let him," she said with difficulty. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She didn't want to leave her sister alone with the giant animal. But seeing the determination in Emma's eyes, she slowly backed away. One of the security team members shouted, "No, get away from there. This is very dangerous." I've spent years studying animal behavior, but what I witnessed that day, it stays with me still. A gorilla, a massive silverback named Kesi, met the eyes of a woman named Emma. It wasn't just an animal reacting. It was something deeper, a meeting of souls. I remember reading the report later, and the words just hung in the air. A mother and son's farewell after years. Sarah, I recall, had to tell everyone to just stop, to wait. Kesi was enormous, casting a shadow over Emma, who was in a wheelchair. Then, so slowly, he crouched down, until their faces were almost level. His giant hand reached out, his fingers so gently touching Emma's face, like she was a child. He caressed her cheek, took a cherry blossom petal from her hair, examined it, and placed it on the ground. Then he rested his huge head on Emma's knees. Everyone froze. Security, visitors, staff. No one even breathed. It wasn't just animal behavior. Emma raised a trembling hand and touched Kesi's head, feeling his warm, soft fur. Tears flowed from her eyes, but not from pain, from gratitude. Kesi made a strange, almost human sound, a whimper gorillas make only in the deepest emotional moments. It was as if he was saying, "Mom, you're here. I missed you. I never forgot you." Then Emma spoke. The words were difficult, choppy, but they came from her heart. "I love you, Kesi." He lifted his head slightly and looked at her. There were no tears in his amber eyes, but there was understanding, acceptance, as if he knew she wouldn't be with him much longer. His giant hand reached for the wheelchair armrest, carefully examined the metal edges, and then placed his hand on hers. There, under the falling cherry blossoms, their hands joined. Emma realized he was being careful not to hurt her, that every movement was calculated, controlled, because he knew she was fragile and he wanted to protect her. Minutes passed. The security teams lowered their weapons. This wasn't a threat, it was love. Dr. Alan Thompson, the center's director, stepped forward. His eyes welled up. He'd worked with animals for years, but had never seen such a bond. "The most extraordinary thing I've ever witnessed," he said, his voice trembling. "This is something even science can't explain." Sarah was crying, and other visitors silently shed tears. Everyone understood this wasn't just a woman and a gorilla. It was a universal bond, the bond between mother and child, a love that disregarded species, time, and distance. Kesi slowly lifted his head, looked at Emma one last time, and wiped the tears from her eyes with his finger. The movement was compassionate, protective, full of love. Emma wanted to say one last thing, but words weren't enough. Kesi understood. He knew everything she wanted to tell him. "You are my son," she said, with her last strength. Kesi rested his head on her knees again. This wasn't a goodbye. It was a moment of gratitude for the most beautiful gift life had given them. As the sun rose, Kesi stayed by Emma's side. Dr. Thompson approached with a basket of Kesi's favourite fruits. "Kesi," he said softly, "come on, buddy. Let Emma rest." Kesi hesitated, as if he knew that if he left, he would never see her again. And perhaps he was right. Emma gently pushed him away. "Go," she whispered. "Be well." Kesi placed his hand on Emma's one last time, held it tightly, then slowly stood up, his eyes still on her. He took a few steps back, stopped, turned, looked at Emma one last time, a look filled with gratitude, love, farewell, and a silent promise he would never forget her. Dr. Thompson guided Kesi back inside. Kesi wasn't interested in the fruits. He only looked back at Emma, his head turned, his eyes never leaving her. When the door closed, Kesi stood there, leaned against the bars, and stayed like that for a long time, motionless, silent, just watching Emma. Sarah moved behind the wheelchair. "Should we go?" she asked, her voice trembling. Emma nodded slightly. Yes, it was time. I still remember the day I learned how Emma Carter and Kesi were buried. It was said that cherry blossom petals danced in the wind that night, even though it wasn't the season. As if Emma and Kesi were somehow still showing their love. It's a story that reminds me that love knows no language, species, or barrier. That farewell between Emma and Kesi. It was a real farewell, and they both knew it. As the chair began to turn, Kesi made a sound, a long, pain-filled call, the kind gorillas make only in very special situations, like a mother's or a son's call. As they moved toward the center's exit, people silently made way, still under the influence of that moment. Some were crying. Some were just looking in shock because what they had just seen wasn't normal animal behavior. It felt like a miracle. When they got home, Sarah made tea for Emma, but she couldn't drink it. She felt empty inside, as if a part of her had stayed there with Kesi. That night, Emma lay in her bed, looked at the ceiling, and thought of the night she first saw Kesi, that tiny white infant, and how she had taken him in her arms, how she had made a promise. "I will protect you. I will love you." And she had kept her promise. Every day, every moment, she had done what was best for Kesi. Days passed, weeks passed. Sarah brought her news of Kesi, said he was doing well. But there was something Sarah didn't say. Kesi came to the bars every evening at sunset and looked at the last place Emma had stood. 2 months later, one morning when Emma woke up, she was having trouble breathing. The disease had progressed. Sarah called the ambulance, but Emma refused. She didn't want to go to the hospital. She wanted to be at home in peace. That night, as she lay in her bed, she looked out the window. The moon was full, and white light was filtering into the room. And at that moment, a strange feeling overcame her, as if Kesi were beside her, as if that giant hand were touching hers again. She closed her eyes and imagined Kesi, his white fur, his amber eyes, his giant but gentle hands. And she imagined that last day, that perfect day when cherry blossoms danced in the air, when the sun illuminated everything. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for letting me love you, Kesi." And that night, Emma fell asleep in peace. The next morning, Sarah couldn't wake her. He knew what love was, and he never forgot it. That night, the full moon illuminated both graves. Emma and Kesi, mother and son, two souls, finally together again. I've always been moved by stories of deep connection, and there's something about the thought of two people being so intertwined, so inseparable, that their fates become one. It reminds me of a passage I once read in an old manu, detailing a similar bond. It stayed with me ever since,